with Don and Sunny.
I
Hey,
love, I
Don, how
love
you doing?
doing great. I love Wonderful Wednesday with Sunny. Even when it's not sunny, it's sunny here.
Yeah, I'll tell you what, today was a gorgeous day. It's sunny
Yeah.
over here. It's like
Uh-huh.
almost 50 degrees. The sun was
Yeah.
out
Hmm.
and the wind wasn't blowing because we've had some wind events that I'm sure you guys have too, and it was
Oh,
just a beautiful day.
yeah. We had there was a stretch where I looked out the window and it was like blue skies and beautiful also. And the wind is down. Temperatures like, 47, 48 this time of year is like almost shorts weather, right? So
Right.
it was, but yeah, the wind was incredible. There was a big, I'm not sure it was an oak tree, but I mean, a gigantic evergreen tree fell through like a brick wall down the street. And I guess it got part of the house too. I mean, it's like,
Ooh.
yeah, it's pretty when you get that ground saturated and you have those big trees in that wind, it could be dicey.
Definitely, definitely. So, hey, Bobby wants to know how's your knee doing, Don?
Just returned from physical therapy, Bobby. It was great. I have full range of motion. I rode the bicycle last week for the first time in 2 months, about 5 miles, very slowly. I was in the granny gear, so it was nothing, nothing fancy going on, but I could do it. So yes, thank you. Though, doing pretty well.
That's great. That really is great. Well, talking about medical things, so that's actually what we're going to start with. And I'm going to post a story here from Zero Hedge, and has to do with CDC, or yeah, the CDC has released VAERS data. Has finally releases VAERS safety monitoring analysis for the COVID vaccines, and in looking at this story, I think it's really good. Donna and I like to bring awareness to things. We've talked about the COVID vaccines and that here before. So Zero Hedge has put out this article on a Monday and talking about this. And there's a lot of language in here. I really encourage you all to take a look at this because there's a lot of language about um, how they come to the determining and why they're doing this. So it is covers 18 months and it clearly shows safety signals for death and a range of highly concerning thromboembolic, cardiac, neurological, different adverse events among U.S. adults. There were 770 different types of adverse events that showed safety signals in ages 18 and over, of which over 500 had a larger safety signal than myocarditis or pericarditis. And there's also, with this, it shows that the CDC analysis shows that the number of serious adverse events reported is less than 2 years for mRNA COVID-19 vaccines. It's 5.5 times larger than all serious reports for vaccines given to adults in the US since 2009. So 73,000 versus 13,000. And twice as many mRNA COVID vaccine reports were classified as serious compared to all other vaccines given to adults. So this meets the CDC definition for a safety signal. There were 96 safety signals for 12 to 17-year-olds. There were 66 of these safety signals for 5 to 11-year-olds. And so I'm just going to read. There's a lot of information in here, and some things I had to actually look up. So the VAERS scientists look for unusually high numbers of reports of an adverse event after a particular vaccine or a new pattern of adverse events. And if scientists see either of these, focus studies in other systems are done to determine if the adverse event is or is not a side effect of a vaccine. And the information from VAERS and vaccine safety studies is then shared with the public. Well, there's not been a lot. I mean, to just be truthful about it, there's not been a lot, especially when you get the vaccine box and you take out the pamphlet that's giant and it's blank.
Mhm.
So that shows you there's not a lot out there. But so to cover some of these things, major categories of adverse event safety signals from CDC's analysis is, I'm just going to read a few of these, probably the largest ones, the top, starting at the top. And cardiovascular was over 70,000. Now, this is an 18-month period. I'm just going to remind you again, an 18-month period from December of 19 until July of 22. And so there was neurological was about 50,000, a little over. Thromboembolic embolic is over like 25,000, and pulmonary is 25,000. And Don, what's thromboembolic?
Yeah, so think of like a clot, like into a major artery or vein, that thrombosis, that's what that would allude to.
Okay. And menstrual was nearly 20,000. Death was over 10,000. And then, so that was the major categories. Now, there's more. It goes into hemorrhagic, gastrointestinal, it's immunological and cancer.
Mhm.
So then they have the major cardiovascular adverse events was AFib, atrial fibrillation, was nearly 40,000.
Which is really,
And
really dangerous, by the way. I'm sure the audience realizes that.
yeah, irregular heartbeat was almost 3,500. No, I said 40,000. No, I'm sorry. I misspoke there. Almost 4,000. AFib is almost 4,000. It only has 3 zeros. So sorry about that.
Mhm.
Irregular heartbeat, again, is almost 3,500. Myocarditis is about 2,000. Cardiac failure is about 2,000. Cardiac arrest is about 1,700. Pericarditis, the same.
Mhm.
Cardiac flutter and was about 2,000 or no, under 1,500. Let's call it about 1,200. So those are some of those. Then we have major neurological adverse events. Tinnitus was nearly 14,000. Migraines is about 6,000. There's more. There's more. This print is so small. It's hard for me to read that one.
Yeah. So suffice it to say, I think that it's what's happening now is criminal. I mean, it was criminal from the beginning, but with all of this data, we have now reached a point where you really can't justify that being on the market. Honestly, you couldn't justify it in the first place because the trials were never done. We've never had people put something in their bodies, that wasn't run through clinical trials first, and then on top of that, mandated it and threatened people with the loss of their jobs if they didn't do it. And I'm just talking strictly from a medical standpoint, not talking about the ethical side of that. It's incredible, and that people would continue to try to sell this when it really should be pulled from the market. At a worst case, it should be like a black label on it that basically says, "Take this at your with a skull and crossbones. Take this at your risk." I mean, historically, we've never uh, given anything to women of childbearing age, for example, or minors, and they're pushing this for people for whom minors, for example, have almost no benefit. I mean, they're the ones who are least likely to be impacted by COVID. I know I'm preaching to the choir here, but
Yeah.
it's just the data increasingly does not support it. And I think what we're going to see increasingly is these people doubling down, because how do you say that you are wrong now? Take a pretty ethical person to say that. And ethics is one thing that's completely absent here. Um, I mean, you've been pushing this thing and banging the drum, and are you really going to reverse yourself? That very few people are going to be capable of doing that. Um, we'll see.
Yeah, people don't like to admit when they're wrong, but science is about questioning
Hmm.
and having a theory. Some another scientist can do the theory, and if they come to the same conclusion, it is always about questioning. And that's where, for me, I went, how come they're saying we can't say anything or question any of this? Some things just never made sense to me, but now we have some data,
Hmm.
and so it goes into other things of hemorrhagic adverse events, gastrointestinal adverse events, and then it comes into adverse event safety signals for 12 to 17-year-olds and also 5 to 11-year-olds. It does not give any, it does say that there were 92 safety signals for 12 to 17-year-olds and 65 for 5 to 11-year-olds. But remember, in the very beginning, they stated, which I think was the truth, was children are not affected.
No.
Children are not
No.
affected by COVID. And yet they were very much pushing the having the vaccines or shot given to children. And so one of these, I actually I had to look it up because I had never heard of it before. Kawasaki disease.
Yeah.
And do you know what that is, Don?
I have to admit, I don't know, but while you're talking, I will look it up. I bet
Okay.
it's neurological, but
It's actually it is the heart,
it's
and,
all.
because I went, "Wow, I've never even heard of Kawasaki disease." So and they have, myocarditis, pericarditis, Bell's palsy. This is for 12 to 17-year-olds.
Hmm.
Genital ulcerations, high blood pressure,
Hmm.
tachycardia, these are not things.
Hmm.
So this
Yeah.
was 92 safety signals for this age group.
Hmm.
And then for the 5 to 11-year-olds, it's again myocarditis, pericarditis, and ventricular dysfunction, cardiac valve. And in there is Kawasaki disease. And I just went, what is that? I never heard of it.
Well, see, we're going to hear about lots of things we've never heard of. But cardiovascular disease, look, cardiovascular disease is when you're in your 20s and teen years is just not natural. I'll just,
No, no, and especially not in children, by any cardiac arrhythmias. I mean, I'm sure those things are pretty rare in kids. I don't know,
they used to be.
but that would just be my guess. You
Yeah,
know,
you know.
that's, there's always the rare event
Hmm.
that happens, but this is more common, you know, and
And that's
to,
the thing. I think most of us want to rely on authorities to tell us what to do, or someone who's got a degree in it. And I think at the end of the day, those things are useful. I mean, if somebody's a specialist in a certain area, you give them their due. But I think we have to all learn to think for ourselves and make evidence-based decisions. So just because your doctor is saying do something doesn't mean you just run out and go do it. I mean, it's your body at the end of the day. And the way some of these people are being, I think, incentivized, um, let's just say your interests aren't necessarily in alignment with theirs. Any company that would sell a product that is shielded from immunity in the event that that product does you harm is probably a product you ought to avoid. If General Motors came along and said, we have, you buy our car, but there's no liability, like none. If the motor blows up like the old Pinto back in the 70s and 80s, right? If it gets rear-ended and blows up, tough noogies. No
right.
one would buy it. Um, but here we have companies marketing products that they won't stand behind,
Yeah.
and on top of that, having the government be as a sledgehammer to mandate you to take this thing. Makes it double criminal. If it was so good, people would take it. They would not have to be forced. Mhm.
Well, you're absolutely right, and that segues right into the next post that I'm going to post right here, because this is from the Epoch Times, and we've talked about the Twitter files here.
Mhm.
Well, in another Twitter file release, the Pfizer board member pressured Twitter, a Pfizer board member at the time, pressured Twitter to censor posts on natural immunity and low COVID risk to children. And this is all documented in emails.
Mhm.
And so that is, why would you have to do that?
Mhm.
Natural immunity has always been, scientifically, natural immunity, any illness has always been superior to anything once you have it, right?
Sure.
It always has. That's what I grew up
Mm.
knowing
Yeah.
and being told is your natural immunity. Once you have something, I mean, that's why parents would have chicken pox parties, right? Isn't that what they did, right? Oh, kids get chicken pox. Oh, take them all over there, get them sick, get them over it, and
Get it over
and
with.
just
Right.
be done, right?
Mhm. Yeah.
And so here you have that Dr. Scott Gottlieb wrote in August 27th of 2021 to Twitter executive Todd Boyle to request Twitter to take action against a post from Dr. Brett Girar, another former FDA commissioner. This is the kind of stuff that's corrosive, he says. Here he draws a sweeping conclusion off a single study in Israel that hasn't been peer reviewed. And the tweet ended up going viral and driving news coverage. And so they need to, it's amazing with the Twitter files, what's come out. That, of course, the mainstream media is suppressing this information.
Mhm.
And so Garar had written it was unclear that it was clear natural immunity or post infection immunity is superior to
Mhm.
vaccine immunity by a lot. And
You
that's
know,
what they wanted to censor.
there was a time when, not in the not very distant past, when the left would have gone absolutely ape over a company benefiting from forcing you to like buy something, and they just would have went ape. In what's happened? Why are they pro enriching these companies to do something that's clearly at a minimum against the Constitution? Um, and the Nuremberg Code and a whole bunch of other codes. It's uh, it's spectacular what's happened to the left.
Well, it is, and the suppression of information, and I'll tell you, I had a conversation with my doctor, and he was very much encouraging me to get the vaccine, and I said no, and I talked with him about the efficacy,
Hmm.
and I had that conversation with
Hmm.
him, and I made my informed decision not to have it.
Hmm.
Even though he was recommending that to me, but there's other things he's recommended to me that I've not done either. And
Right.
it's just, you know what? We're all in charge of our health.
Yeah.
And it's very important to do research for
Hmm.
yourself
Hmm.
and decide what's right for you, because what might be good for me might not be good for you, Don. All of our medical history is different.
Hmm.
And as a term that I never knew, but comorbidities, things that can affect our health, that I might have and you don't, or vice versa.
Hmm.
But to have information suppressed and censored, as we now know through Twitter, how much has been censored. It's astronomical, the complicitness of the mainstream media.
Mhm. Well, what's
And
happened is a complete this whole way that we live is based on a foundation of assumed morality, and it only works because people you can count on that person to behave in a moral way. Now, obviously, I'm not saying everybody's going to be, like, Benedict or something, right? A saint. That's not the case. But there is a bar beneath which you fall that a constitutional republic can no longer function. So think about these just basic things. Like, you assume that your doctor's taking a Hippocratic oath. You assume that they're going to be doing things that are in your best interest. You assume that outfits like the New England Journal of Medicine and Lancet, when they do peer-reviewed journals, that those things are not compromised. Man, it used to be that they weren't. Um, and we are at a place now where none of that's true. I don't know that I would hang my hat even on something like a New England Journal of Medicine article, because these people lack ethics that they had 30, 40, 50 years ago. They just don't have it. And people are on the take. And what that means is, it means that you as a consumer, us as consumers, you cannot rely on other people, us included, right? Me
right,
included, right? You
right,
need to learn how to think. And evidence-based reasoning is what I always try to tell my kids. Don't just because
yeah,
dad said it doesn't make it true. You go and see if the evidence supports that. And we're surrounded by evidence, right? I mean, by
right,
now, you probably know people who have been hurt by this, whatever you want to call it, vaccine,
yeah.
or worse. And you see the data. If you look at other media other than what they're showing you, you see that it doesn't work. You don't need some pointy-headed, Ivy League person to tell you what to do.
Mhm. Yeah, and I'm reading some of the comments on here, Don, and I have to tell you, I realize my doctor needs to keep his job, but
Hmm.
I hear you about the Hippocratic Oath, you know, um, and I weighed that, going, wow, okay, because look at how many people were ostracized
Hmm.
by speaking out against it.
Oh, a lot of
And
schools don't require the Hippocratic Oath anymore. They've modified it, for example. A lot of people don't realize that, right? So,
right,
you know,
right, exactly. And it's difficult to be in that between a rock and a hard place.
hmm well, most of us, it's human nature to want to go the easy road, um, and not have to think. It really is. But not thinking can get you killed, or worse. I mean, there are
Yeah,
some things that just require more. If you're trying to decide whether to have a Three Musketeer or a Snickers bar, then maybe that's not going to hurt you, right?
yeah,
But if you're trying to decide which physician to go to for your cardiovascular surgery, or whether to get a vaccine or not, well, that could have longer lasting ramifications. Um, but we're in a
yeah,
different world.
absolutely. And at that time, I had a girlfriend who was a retired physician, and she says, "No, these things cause, myocarditis." I never heard of myocarditis. I didn't know what any of that was. Now I've learned.
Hmm.
I've learned more medical terminology than I ever wanted to know, quite frankly.
Right. Yeah.
And like looking up Kawasaki disease, I go, "What is
Mhm.
that?"
Yeah.
And why are children getting it? Well, it's common. It's not common, but it affects more
Hmm.
children than it
Hmm.
does adults. and and she had told me that, and I just go, okay.
Hmm.
She says, I'm not getting it because of that. I went, okay. She's the person who's done her homework
Hmm.
way more than me, but I definitely read. I read and read and read. And so wanted to bring those things in to just bring awareness. It's an avenue of some data to look at those VAERS reports. And so, hey, switching gears over, bringing it home to Oregon a little bit here. There's a lot of talk about the housing shortage and whatnot. Well, this is from the Oregon Catalyst, and it's an article that's saying that nearly $100,000 in fees over costs before one can even build a house. So here we have, they want to have more houses built, and I'm posting that story now. And but before you can even build anything, you're going to have to pay nearly $100,000 in fees. Now, it's interesting in this story that Oregon needs to build 500,000 houses over the next 20 years, but that's on top of the $140,000 needed right due to underbuilding in the last decade. And I'll remind our audience that under Governor Kate Brown, they added that every home built in Oregon has to be alternative energy ready. That at that time, and that's several years ago, I want to say at least, I'm going to guess about 4 years ago.
Mhm.
And at that time, that the estimated cost was $35,000 adding to the cost of the house. You're not
Mhm.
getting solar panels.
Mhm.
Okay, and it makes it that the house would be all wired up to accept solar panels on the house, as another $35,000 cost to it.
And
Well,
as
that's
usual,
gone up exponentially
Mhm.
with the cost of everything else.
And as usual, it's the middle class or the underclass that gets burned by this stuff. Everything the Democratic Party does is designed to destroy the underclass and the working class. That's who gets hurt by this. It's easy for them behind their gated communities to pay for this money with your tax dollars and afford these homes. But
Yeah.
that's how they roll.
But something that caught my eye at the end of this article is talking about, the mortgage, like, if you had a $1,750 a month mortgage, would buy you a $500,000 house a year ago. Well, today it would get you $275,000 house. So that means for the $500,000 house, your mortgage is $3,150 a month
Mhm.
today, with the interest rates the way they are. So, well, a few years back, the legislature passed a law requiring cities to make all land zoned for single family residences
Mhm.
okay for duplexes. And this article says, I saw how this worked in North Portland, where some of the last affordable single family residences,
Mhm.
300,000 at the time, were replaced wholesale with $1 million per side duplexes.
Yep.
The cornerstone of the legislature's latest plan is hundreds of millions of dollars for workforce housing. Hundreds of millions of dollars for workforce housing for government workers.
Mhm.
With Portland's 2020 median income at about 75,000 a year, that means we'll be subsidizing houses for people earning as much as 100,000 a year, provided they're a public employee.
Right.
This is socialism coming into Oregon even more,
Yeah. Yeah. Well,
subsidizing the housing for government employees.
see, somebody's got to pay the taxes, right? And those people are going to leave, like California. They're not going to stay there and put up with it. But
Well, the government employees that are going to get their house subsidized, their housing subsidized, are going to, right? They're
Mhm.
getting a pension, they're
Mhm.
getting, all the benefits.
Yeah.
So the reason so now I'm going to move on very quickly here into Oregon. Oregon Center for Public Policy plan is to mess up our tax code. This is from the Oregon Catalyst. The next few stories on Oregon are from the Oregon Catalyst.
Mhm.
And the Liberal Oregon Center for Public Policy, OCPP, is the never-ending quest in its never-ending quest, to soak the well off, is advocating a big change on how capital gains are taxed. They are asking for, very short, I'm going to cut to the chase, that unrecognized capital gains, people will have to pay taxes on. Any of your investments, if it's gone up in value, you would have to pay taxes on it. And it is, so you know what? That will stifle all growth. This type of thing needs to be absolutely shut down, a quick demise, and it's called mark to market proposal. That's what it
Yeah.
is. It's called
Mhm.
mark to market, and
And
it
it's
is a half-baked idea. But I'll tell you, these types of things are what is dangerous.
it's been
And I'm
talked
gonna,
about, yeah, before. It's been talked about for a long time. It will utterly just decimate the middle class. I mean, you think about the older couple that bought a house 40 years ago in Portland, and it went from $90,000 to like $1 million, and they're retired and on a fixed income, and now they got to pay like some exorbitant property tax based on $1 million house. That's probably about a what 1,500-foot house in certain neighborhoods in Portland,
yeah,
and this is true in pretty much every city in the country. It is another insane left wing commie proposal.
it is. So another story here from Oregon Catalyst. There's, excuse me, a video. This is actually by Taxpayer Association for Oregon. 8 million viral views for "Get Free Stuff and Be High All Day" from a homeless lady. And I didn't
We
see the
high
video,
all
but
day.
I saw this story. And this story is about a homeless woman who said some bold statements and has gone viral with at least 8 million views online. She said that being homeless meant getting free stuff all day, then getting high for the rest. And she said Portland was loving homeless people to death. So, and you know what? There, you're right, but it's not
Yeah,
just Portland, because when
literally
we
to death.
pass these narcotics and we're just giving all this free stuff away.
Mhm,
So K2 tracked her down, and then she walked back her previous statement.
mhm.
Wendy told K2 TV that it had been misinterpreted as her personal experience rather than her hyperbolic observation of what's happening all around her. People are doing whatever they want, whenever they want, and no one is stopping them. Wendy said she doesn't get high all day and have fun. And of course, homelessness is hard. You get to the point where you're tired of being outside, you're tired of being cold. Well, yeah.
Yeah.
And, but wait a minute, it's a multi-million dollar business
Mhm.
trying to help the homeless, don't you know? They're
Oh, yeah.
giving out tents,
Yeah,
they're
trying to help
feeding
them
them.
stay homeless. So it's a multi-million dollar business getting them the drugs. So you have that element. There's a multi-million dollar business keeping them homeless, which is where the government comes in. So the cartels are making on one end, the government makes it on the other end. The objective of none of these programs is to help these people out, because by now we know what not to do, because we've been doing that for a long time. So whenever you see something like that, whenever you see a system that's in place for a long, long time and it's getting a bad result, the question you have to ask yourself is this: who is it benefiting? Um, you can't listen to what they say in terms of who is benefiting. You got to look at the result, and the result's bad for an extended period of time. You know it's that way because it's benefiting someone. And just I'm in the soapbox for one last second. For example, the public schools, Exhibit A, they've been bad for a long time. We know they're bad. They haven't changed. That means they're not. Their purpose is not what they say it is. The purpose is not to educate your kids. The purpose is to provide jobs for people and provide daycare for other people. That's the purpose. Anyway, I'll stop.
No, you're absolutely right. And as you were talking, Don, I was thinking, oh, yeah, the war on drugs,
Mhm,
the war on homelessness. It's not doing anything.
mhm. Yeah, and
And as I had talked on either Wednesday or Friday last week, that like my county where I live, Umatilla County, is one of 5 counties in Oregon that got money for homeless programs,
Mhm.
like to develop homeless programs. And I feel like, okay, they're just going to start shipping them out here then,
Well, that's what it is. The
you
homeless
know?
program is a euphemism for, let's give them goodies and grow that population, or
Yeah.
attract them from other states, which is the other thing that happens, because these people are not fools. Hey, I used to talk to people in various jobs I've had in the past, and they would say, "Hey, I hear Oregon's a great place to be for
Right.
whatever their behavioral thing was," and then they come out here. So that's what happens.
So this K2 TV interviewed someone else, a guy,
Hmm.
the man who shot the original video, and his statement was enlightening. I'm just going to read a portion of this um, very quickly. Not just Wendy, but multiple homeless have said the system is loving us to death. They hate the idea that they're being enabled. They
Hmm.
might not say it, but they still don't like it.
Hmm.
What they want is to be empowered. They want responsibility. They want accountability. And, but yet, uh, just before you got here, I went in a 2-block radius. I counted 84 camps within 2 blocks. Completely unacceptable.
Hmm.
And it's 24/7. Why aren't outreach workers out here 24/7 helping these people, solving all of this? Where are they? There you are. That goes to your statement. Then
Yeah.
um, Lars Larson says when states legalize hard drugs, bystanders get hurt. Well, you heard about the guy who bit off somebody's ear. He's this man, a 78-year-old man, waiting for a max light uh, train. And this 25-year-old guy who's on alcohol, pot, and fentanyl comes and thinks this guy's a robot because he could smell. By the smell of him, he says, I just knew he was a robot and he was going to try to kill him. And he thought the robot was going to kill the guy who's loaded out of his brains, right?
Mhm.
And bites his ear off, bites his face, chews it up. This is sick.
Yeah.
And this is Portland.
Yeah. Yeah.
You
We
know,
have a lack of leadership in this city or state of people willing to do the hard thing or the right thing, which is usually the hard thing. And what it boils down to is, there's the first side of it, you got to enforce the law, which they don't do. And then secondly, you got to have the compassion side. So these people, look, and this is a compassionate thing to say for the guy who bit this other guy's face. That's a guy who's in serious psychological trouble.
yeah,
And he needs help. He doesn't need to be wandering the streets. Eventually, he's going to die in the streets. Either somebody's going to kill him, or he's going to die of exposure or drug overdose, or that's what's going to happen. The right thing to do would be to lock the guy up, get him cleaned up, and then help him get on his feet. But the people in the leadership in this state have no interest in that because I think they like it like this. They benefit from things being exactly how they are.
yeah. Well, you're right. So I just posted another story in the Oregon Catalyst, and it says "Right from the Start" by Larry Huss. And this is really an interesting article because it says, one of the best things about democracy is that the voters get to choose the type of government they prefer. And based on that, you would assume that Oregon has moved to the far left wing of the Democrat Party.
Mhm.
This article is Oregon continues to drift towards socialism. And I'll tell you, after reading this, he does the numbers of how many workers, what's the percentage of those working for the government, what's the percentage of those that are on unemployment, what's the percentage of those that are disabled and whatnot. Well, I'll tell you what, you put that to voters as well.
Mhm.
And so he got all these statistics from Bureau of Labor Statistics as of November 2022. And what it boils down to is over 50%, 52% of
Mhm.
Oregonians that are available to work, but you have 58% that are working for the government.
Now, see, that there tells you something. You can't have more people working for the government than not working for the government. That is a system that will eventually collapse. Um, you
And
you have to do
those, and he
mathematician to
talks
get it all.
about this, that, those that are working for the government, that are in the union, they're, the teachers and whatnot, just all the bureaucracy that there is, they don't want to vote for smaller government.
No, because they benefit from that. One of the biggest crimes or one of the biggest wrongs that we've done societally is to allow for these government unions to get so big and powerful, because they're just going to vote for stuff that's in their interest. You get this big, gigantic, bloated bureaucracy, and public school system is probably the number one of these that I could think of. And they don't produce anything. I mean, you can look at like unions in the private world, and yes, they've had their excesses, but those people also have to produce something. So that's the check. If you get unions that get so out of control that they keep the company from making money, and think about what happened in the '80s with the American auto companies, for example, the check became competition from Japan, and they had to reorganize all of that, and now cars are like phenomenal, right? And not to say that unions haven't had positive roles, because obviously you can go back in time when people were abused by employers, and so they do have their place. But the problem with the government unions is there's not that natural check. They're not producing anything, um, and if they're really bad, nothing seems to happen. And generally speaking, the kinds of people who go to work for government, it's the old 80-20 rule, right? Basically, this is my experience anyway. In the government sector, you have one person who's a great employee supporting 5 dogs. Um, and everybody's been at the post office or Department of Motor Vehicles knows this is true, or Amtrak, or any of these places. In the private sector, is the reverse, because eventually you get fired, or you get you're not incented to continue to do as little as possible. But you can float in a government job all day long and do virtually nothing and never get fired. And a lot of people realize that, and that's why they gravitate towards those jobs.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
in an honest moment, you can get a lot of people who actually admit that. So you can't have too many of those, because eventually the society will collapse from the weight of them.
Well, absolutely. Absolutely. It will collapse, and this is why trying to bring awareness, bringing attention to issues and statistics and numbers, and talk about this, because this is where, we've pretty much, we talk often, like David and I talk about voting and that, and whatnot, and we have to we have to get I was having a conversation with someone the other day going, how come Umatilla County is so bad in the voter turnout? And I said, well, we've got 12,000 people who just never turn a ballot in.
Mhm.
12,000 unaffiliated voters. We have 20,000 unaffiliated voters in Umatilla County, and
Mhm.
12,000 of them don't care. So how do you wake up those people and try to get them to vote? Of
Mhm.
course, conservative. I don't want them voting for the Democrat side, but to vote conservative. And anyway, food for thought. Now we have
Yeah.
some good news to finish on. Last Wednesday, we were talking about Damar Hamlin, and because it had just been on Monday Night Football, with millions of people watching, he died on the field. He went into cardiac arrest. And so last Wednesday, we talked about that. And now today, he has been released and able to go home
Mhm.
from being intubated. He had to get revived twice. And And so now he is on his way home. He's been found neurologically sound. And the power of prayer, the prayer on the field that day, and subsequently, I haven't watched it, but I've heard about other games. And you were telling me right before coming on, of an announcer and all the players went, saying a prayer, and everybody went on the field and was praying. And
We're talking
so,
about big media that previous to this had been, if somebody had anything with prayer or Christianity, they block them, pretend like they had a failure with the news media feed. They were doing all of that sort of thing. But here, in front of 18 million viewers were watching that, and countless millions other went back and reviewed it. And I understand one of the announcers just like went into prayer. So the I think one of the neat things about that was it showed that this country is not completely gone. I mean, it's tough that it took a moment like that for us to go back to the fundamentals, but we are still aware of them. And it must have been a real downer for the left to see that happen. But it was good. It was good, and I'm glad to hear that he's alive, because I didn't think, oof, that was a close call. Let's put it that way.
well, I didn't either. I didn't, but being a young man and in peak physical fitness, I'm going to say helped. But you know what? The prayer is awesome. And for if this can lead more people to believing in God and believing in the power of prayer, um, that's a miracle. And right now, he's a miracle, you
He
know.
absolutely is. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So, and I hope it can help unite people. And this it's because there's been a lot of praying going on at football games ever since that happened. A
Sure,
lot
sure.
more openly.
Yeah, yeah. Mysterious ways is all I can say.
Well, let me tell you, God's in control, and he goes, oh, here's somebody we can use.
Yeah,
Here's a situation I can use.
right,
So,
right. That's exactly right.
yeah, yeah. So everybody will. Do you have any last words, Don?
I don't. Other than I think optimism is the way, and I think that was a very optimistic note we just landed on. People are becoming more and more aware. You can hide the truth, you can bury the truth, you can cover the truth up, but the truth is like water. It's gonna go over, under, it evaporates, it wears down, it eventually gets out. And I think we keep that thought in mind, and stay faithful, and we'll get to the other side. So yeah.
Yep. Okay. Thank you, Don, and thank you, everybody. Have a great evening. I'll be back on Friday with David, and spread the word. Thank you, and good night.
Good night, everybody.